Hi, everybody. So we've now spent a little bit of time just being analytical about apps and the different kinds of apps, iOS apps versus Android apps, and different functionalities of apps and different categories of apps as they would be categorized on the App Store. So now we really want to get into actually using software to develop applications. And we are going to use something called the Android Development Kit. And so let's talk a little bit about that. Specifically, we're going to use Android Studio. And Android Studio is what's called an IDE, an integrated development environment. And inside of that is something called an SDK. So the Android Development Kit is an SDK, a software development kit. So all kinds of different platforms that you would develop for have SDKs. So there's an iOS development kit, SDK for iOS, which would be apps, of course, for Apple's mobile devices. If you do game design, there'll be GDKs or game development kits, which are ultimately just SDKs, software development kits, which are the tools necessary to develop for specific platforms, and they bundle them together into an SDK. An IDE, which Android Studio is, or if you were developing for iOS, you would use something called Xcode. An IDE is an integrated development environment, which is just an interface with which to work with the SDK. It'll have different things you need, like a compiler, etc., and it'll have a nice interface for you to work with. And that's what Android Studio is an IDE that will allow you to work with the SDK and develop for Android. We're using Android because it's free, because there's an emulator in it, so you don't have to have an Android device to look at the project you're working on to see it running in action. And today, or this week, what I want you to do is install Android Studio on your computer. And I will step over to my computer in a minute and show you the process of me installing Android Studio on my computer, which is a Mac. A lot of you are probably installing on a Windows device, so it'll look a little bit different unless you happen to also be working on a Mac, which is, of course, fine. Android will work on either of them. So you'll need to go through the process of installation, and you'll see when I'll install the application, then I'll have to run updates. A lot of times there's a lot of work involved in getting software installed on your device, which is why that's a major part of what your workload is for this week. And then once you install that software and run any updates on it that you need to run, we'll go ahead and build our first very simple Android file. In fact, it really involves not much more, if anything more, than just opening up the software, creating a new application, typing in a little bit of information, selecting some preferences, and then I'll have you actually run the application, this super simple Hello World application on the emulator. So Hello World, for those of you that haven't done any programming, is like the most simple original program that people tend to run when they learn a new programming language. In this case, Android Studio actually has everything in there, and you don't even have to do the Java programming to tell it to run Hello World. That it will already be coded into the application. So you won't even have to do that. It'll be mainly you using the IDE's graphical interface and typing in some preferences and then actually running the emulator to run the Hello World assignment. And then I'll show you in here what I want you to do is also just open up whatever super simple word processor or even text editor that you have on your computer and have that on the screen at the same time as Android Studio and the emulator, and type your name in it so that I can see that it's your original work. Take a screen capture of that screen and upload it to this assignment. The screen capture, works different for different computers. The snippet tool SNIPPET or SNIPET or SNIPIT. I forget how it's spelled, but it's the snippet tool is available on most Windows computers, or there are just, you can just do the classic screen capture, like from print screen and then save that, or I don't care. However you want to do screen capture, just get a screen capture image showing me that emulator along with Android Studio, and then your name just typed out on the screen in like a word processor is what I use in this, but a text editor would be fine. And you just upload that photo to me. And what that's going to show me is that you've properly installed Android Studio, which you'll see could be some work, right? And set that up, got your preferences set, and that your emulator is running properly, and that you've created this first Android project and it's functioning properly, so that we can go forward. This is important for you to understand because a lot of times the challenges of creating apps are very much about getting your tools to work properly, accessing the right tools, downloading them, installing them. That's all a big part of the job of creating applications. And as we go forward, I'm going to show you some alternative ways to create apps that are a little easier than some of this stuff that you're going to have to, the sort of the hoops that you're going to have to jump through to create an Android app using Android Studio. But that's what we're going to work on this week. You're going to download the Android Studio, which is going to include something called the Java Development Kit, or JDK, which is a SDK, a software development kit. But that's all included right in Android Studio. So Android Studio does a lot of the heavy lifting for you, and on multiple levels. Just by downloading Android Studio, you're going to get the tools that you need to create an Android app, and then it's going to package it for you in this nice graphical user interface. So if you have any problems installing this, communicate with me right away about it. You need to make sure that the computer you're working on meets the hardware requirements to be able to do this. To be honest with you, one of the more difficult things for your computer to do will be run the emulator, the Android emulator. When you do that, a lot of times on other computers I've had difficulty with that. So that we're going to explore these challenges and make sure that you can get up and running with the Android Development Kit. So let's step over to the computer now and start working on Android Studio to create your first Hello World Android application.
So the first thing we need to do is go ahead and download Android Studio, our integrated development environment. So let's just go to Google and we will query Android Studio. And here you go, Android Studio and Android SDK tools. So you'll come to this screen and it should populate for the computer that you are running on. So if you're on a Windows computer, so if you look at mine, I'm on a Mac. So it comes up with 321 for Mac, and it says the size of it. It gives you download options, etc. But if you're on a Windows computer, it should give you Android Studio for Windows. It figures that out for itself. So we're just going to go over here and download this in just a second. And some terms are going to come up. And there you go. We'll just go ahead and download. Depending on your internet connection, we'll see how long this takes. Might as well. Okay, so it looks like it's all downloaded. And I'm going to open up my downloads folder. There it is. I'll go ahead and move it over to my desktop. Click on desktop. And there's the Android Studio. I'll double click on that. Of course, this is going to be a little different if you're on a Windows computer. But the process is going to be ultimately just like installing any other file onto your computer. So you just sort of download the file, then double click on it, and it'll install on a Mac. You always end up dragging stuff into your applications. So that's what's happening on my computer. It'll be different for you if you're on a Windows computer, but I'm sure you've installed software on your computer before, and that's just what the process is. Also, sometimes it says that you need to install some sort of a Java application. If you try and run it and it doesn't work, it may tell you need to download some Java software to your computer if that's not updated. Java is very important to the Android Studio environment, so you may end up needing to do that. Looks like I am good on my Java right now, but we will find out in just a moment because I'm going to go to Applications, and I'm just going to go ahead and open up Android Studio. So there it is. And we'll see if it runs. If it doesn't, it should tell me why. Let's see if I need to update anything. So this might take a while on your computer as well. Okay, so it's asking me if I want to. I previously had a version of Android Studio on here. It was an older version that I deleted from my computer so that I could show you installation again, and I needed the new updated version, so I figured this was the best way to do it. So I can import the same settings that I had before, which is just where I want to install Android Studio, or I could do a custom location if I wanted to do that, but that's fine. I'm just putting it in my library preferences. Okay, so if you've got everything installed properly, you should come up to this screen when you first click and run Android Studio. And when you do that, the first thing we want to do is just a couple of important configuration details. The first thing we want to do is just check for updates. So click on check for updates, and updates are available, so update now. And the updating might kill my screen capture software, so just do that. I might not be able to show you that, but you definitely want to update, so go ahead and click update now. Accept, next. And this might take a while, folks. So I'm still installing. Some aspects failed. It did ask me about RAM allocation to the what's called the emulator, and it recommended 2 gigabytes, and I gave it 4 because this computer has kind of a lot of RAM on it. The emulator is one way to look at the apps you create on Android Studio, and the emulator is the one that I will tend to focus on here in class, but I will also share documents that show you how to run apps that you've created on Android devices if you wish to do that. So here we are. I'm going to click finish. Android Studio will open up. It'll look like this. And I'm going to reconfigure my Android Studio real quick. I'm going to change it to the dark mode, which is called Darkula. So I'll go to Preferences, And I'm just going to change it to that. I think it looks better. It records a little better. So then we're just going to start a new Android Studio project. And let's call it My First App. And I'm going to set a project location. And I've created a folder called Android Studio. And I'm going to put a new folder in there, and I'll call it My First App also. Except I don't put any spaces in that one. It doesn't really matter. You can put it on your desktop if that'll make it an easy place for you to find the app that you're working on. I created the folder, and then I'll click open. Okay, so now I know where I am creating the app at, and if you don't need to click any of this stuff right here for the purposes of what we're doing, click next. Then we're going to design for phone and tablet, so it's select a form factor, and you have a lot of options. You could go for TV, Android Auto, that's pretty cool. It's probably in cars. Android Things, we're not going to do that. Wear OS, so that's for wearables. But right now we're just going phone and tablet. And click next, and then select an empty activity. And click next again. We'll just leave this stuff the same. We're going to call it, we'll just call it main activity. There are multiple activities inside of an app that you create. So let's sort of understand that about apps. So apps provide multiple entry points. So Android apps are built as a combination of components that can be invoked individually. For example, an activity is a type of app component that provides a user interface. Okay, so the main activity is what starts when the user taps your app icon, for in this example on a phone. But you can take the user straight into a different activity from other places, such as from a notification or even from a different application. Other components, such as broadcast receivers and services, also allow your app to perform background tasks without the user interface. But we're creating just one activity in this app, and it's going to be what opens up as soon as your user would open up the application. So just click finish here. And here we are. So there's a couple of things that you want to look for to make sure that everything is created properly once your app opens up. You're going to want to make sure that your project window is open. That's this right here. My project window is open. But if you don't see that there, then you're going to want to open up your project window. Okay, and to do that, you just go up here to View, and then from View, you would go Tool, Windows, and select Project Window. But there it is. Mine was already open. Because I want you to also just be able to look inside of the file structure that's opened up when you create this app, and make sure that under the Java, so you've got your app file here, then under Java, then you're going to have comma example, because we didn't change anything. And inside of comma example, my first app, you should have the main activity right here. We're just talking about activities. So there's that activity. Okay. Also down here in app res, you open that up, and then under layout, you've got activity main XML there. Okay. App manifests. So when you click on that under manifests, you've got Android manifest XML. And then under Gradle scripts, you're going to have two build Gradle files. So you'll see two files with that name. One is for the project and one is for the app module. You'll see two files with this name. One's for the project in Android Studio, and the other one is for the app module. Each module has its own build Gradle file, and we can talk about this later. But the project currently has just one module. You'll mostly work with the module's build Gradle file to configure how the Gradle tools compile and build your app. Okay, you're not going to need to mess with that for this project. In fact, it's so simple, you don't really need to do anything else. We just want to make sure that the emulator is working for you. And so we're going to run in the emulator. And to do that, it's just as easy as clicking a play button. So there's the little green triangle that's a play button. Click on that. And then it's going to ask you to select a deployment target. And with your installation and update, you should have one device on there to be emulated. And that's a Galaxy Nexus API 25 on my phone. Make sure that's selected and click OK. And then this little fake phone will pop up on your screen. This could take a lot of horsepower on your computer, theoretically. So it just, this could, I've had computers that this has crashed before, and I don't know if it will for you or not. But you're just going to go ahead and run this Android application, and it might take a minute. And what you've got here is it's actually as though you've got a phone with Android installed on it on your desktop. And I never know, I don't have an Android phone, so a lot of times I don't know what to do with this. Just wait and it will pop up, okay? And then it's instantly running the app for you. And so that first app is just the classic Hello World version of the app. So there it is. Hello World. And once you have done this, I want you to just do a simple screen capture of your monitor and save that image and upload that image to me as the assignment to show me that you have created this first Hello World activity. And I want you to do one more thing. I want you to just open up a simple, any word processor. So I'm just going to open this one up, and it'll take just a second to populate on my screen. I'm going to create a new document, and I'm going to type in Mr. Smith. And I'll kind of move that to the edge a little bit. And I'm going to screen capture with that so that I can tell it's original work by you. It's a very simple assignment, but this is going to show me that you've installed Android Studio and you have it working on your computer and that you have gone through the process of creating your first simple app. So there you go. You've now created your first Android app, even though it's about as simple could be. But this is all big steps because now we know that the software is working properly and you've navigated around the interface just a bit.
So there you go. You've created your first Hello World application for Android. And now all you need to do is take that screenshot that I demonstrated on the computer and upload that to Blackboard to get credit for this assignment. Make sure that you also have open in the screen that word processor or text editor, what have you, and have typed your name into it so that I can see its original work. Get that uploaded to me and you will get credit for your first ever Android application. Thanks, everybody. I'll see you next time.